And I say this authentically, by the way, for coaches listening, I believe the off-season is the number one predictor of an athlete of any level actually up-leveling the next year. Whenever you see an athlete that's had a huge breakthrough, the one common thing, they haven't done it by adding more, they haven't done it by outworking, they haven't done it through toughness and discipline. The one common thing that's always there is a really good off-season.
You're listening to Endurance Unlimited, a TrainingPeaks podcast for athletes and coaches, no matter what you're training for. Dial in those workouts with deep insights and cutting-edge science from the most prominent voices in the endurance and hybrid sports world.
We are here at TrainingPeaks headquarters chatting with Matt Dixon, an elite triathlon coach and co-founder of Purple Patch Fitness, author of The Well-Built Triathlete and Fast Track Triathlete. He's also a former pro triathlete himself who's trained multiple world champions and an industry thought leader, talking to us today about his approach to the off season, particularly for coaches, and how one coaches and retains their athletes during this really important time of year. So welcome, Matt.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being here and a great opportunity to have this discussion.
Wonderful. Let's start about talking about season reviews. So we're getting into the off season here in the Northern Hemisphere. The weather is cooling down. Race season is wrapping up. And now is the perfect time for coaches and athletes to sit down and really have that retrospective on how their season is gone. So I'd love if you could walk us through Purple Patch's 4-phase coaching model, which I believe you've outlined as Aspire, Align, Action, and Assessment. And then let's talk about how that season review conversation fits within this framework.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you asked me about the coaching model first, because without that context, it's very, very difficult to just dive into postseason review, because we want to put it in context. And for coaches listening, and I share all of this in the hope that it might inspire some thoughts and considerations that you can maybe pull from stuff that we've worked. And I have no challenge at all if folks want to just borrow or steal the model, or whatever you want to use it. So you want to think about this model as an infinity loop. In other words, it's the process that we guide individual and groups of athletes through. And it's an ongoing process that happens on an annual basis. And in fact, it happens more on a quarterly basis and even a week-by-week basis. So it's the thing that enables us to scale coaching methodology in a really consistent manner, so that we can help our athletes create clarity, we can get alignment with them, so that we're really in lockstep of what we're looking to achieve, and we can actually do the coaching more effectively. In other words, hold them to account, provide them support, enable them to course correct towards the big picture mission. And of course, the last part of it is reflect and have tangible elements that you can look back and say, what is successful? What do we need to build on? What wasn't so successful? And so there are 4 main phases. The first step of the journey is Aspire. And that is a phase that with coaches is so often rushed or skipped over. And that's actually not just saying, what are your goals for the season, but actually defining, what are we looking to do here? So if you go a year ahead, so if we went back 1 year right now, what does success look like for you? Why are you doing this? What's important for you? What's your why? It doesn't need to be something grandiose, but really understanding what's important to the athlete, what success looks like, and with that, getting complete alignment. It's absolutely critical. So that's the aspirational phase. And out of that starts to emerge, well, what are the events? Most people being event driven. What are the events that we're going to choose? And you can't rush that phase. It's a critical phase. The second component is not writing the training plan. The second component then is alignment on what are the actions and steps that we're going to take to move you towards that successful accumulation. So it's road mapping. And this is a really important phase for coaches, because a part of our responsibility is not to just throw everything at the athlete that they need to work on in order to improve, but actually be a filter for them. Of everything you could focus on, what are the things that you are going to focus on to drive this performance needle? And this could be in terms of training, it could be in terms of habits, it could be in organization, it could be in equipment, across everything. And I call this a really important phase of contracting, because by the end of this phase, what the athlete has is, this is my focus, these are the elements I'm going to focus on, I'm committed to them, and I'm aligned, there's that word, with my coach. That's the contracting phase. And those first two phases are so important, because that creates the vision, the structure, and the roadmap. And we can't really move on until we have that. We then move to the coaching, the action phase. And all that is the athlete following along the program that you're prescribing relative to that roadmap. What are your commitments? And that's where, from a classical sense, as a coach, I'm holding the athlete to account. I'm providing and receiving feedback along the journey. I'm helping the course correct and get back on track when they stray off course, which is always going to happen. That's not a failure. That's a part of it. And I'm supporting them. I'm giving them perspective. That's where the power of any successful coaching relationship is trust. And that's where you really build the trust. That's the soft skills of it. And then at the end of it, we bleed into, on an annual basis, when this is applied, when all of the races are done, everything's finished, it moves to assessment. And so this is the time of the year where we're looking back. We pause and we come out of the weeds. So what is assessment? What are the key elements in off-season that we would consider? Well, it's a key point. I would label it a key trait of high performance is reflection. And that's really what we're doing here. So we look back over the course of the last year, coach and athlete, and say, all right, what were the things that were great? In other words, what did you do really well relative to these definition of what success looked like, etc., and the actions that we aligned and committed to? What did you do really, really well? And the answer to that is not, I PR'd at my 5K or I qualified to the race. We're not talking about race outcomes. The things that are under the athlete control, what do you feel like you did really, really well? And you go through and you list them out and you encourage the athlete to think about it before they even come to the meeting and discussion. And you can also, what did we do well as a team? So dependent on your relationship, you're looking to unearth stuff. And the reason you look for the good stuff, even if the race report results haven't been quite as desired, is there are some elements that you can learn from that you want to build on. What's the stuff that we keep? What do we double down on? What do we need to keep focusing on? And then objectively, not to say, this is where you went wrong, Allison, but to objectively review as a partnership, where do we not execute well? What did you fail to achieve? So what are some of the elements? I really committed to doing year-round strength, but in the spring I fell off the wagon and it evaporated. Okay, it's not punitive. I'm not judging you. That occurred. That's something to look at for next year. What about my nutrition? I didn't eat as well as I could. I wasn't consistent. I went too hard in the hard workouts. I got too much fatigue. The program that we worked on together ultimately was probably too much. I showed up fatigued, whatever it might be. But elements that we failed to check the box, we failed to adhere to, we didn't do what we promised ourselves, both in terms of athlete and partnership. And that's a really, really helpful reflective experience, because now you've got the good to build on and the things that are not good that we're going to course correct on. And with that, then we get, as a part of this assessment, re-engagement. All right, what are the lessons? And now, as we think about the off season and we think about next year, what are our actions that we need to take when we redefine and go back into the process as it relates to that aspire phase again? And this is why it's circular. And so that's a description on the annual basis. But of course, this model enables you to do it on a more regular basis, to have check-ins. All right, let's have a check-in. How are we doing? Let's come back. What's good and not so bad? So you use this same model even on a monthly basis as a part of your coaching review sessions, on a quarterly basis, that's Paul's post-race. So this is a very, very flexible type of model that enables you to keep the athlete on track, and most importantly, to feel like you're in partnership and the athlete trusts you and they understand that you have their best intentions and, of course, their performance at the top of your mind.
How would you say that that process can help drive retention with your athletes?
So one of the things that's incredibly important, and we are at the phase of the year right now where there is a big open off-ramp on the freeway and it says exit. Last race of the season is done and it's over. And so when we think about the year forward, I'll come to retention right now, but we think about the year forward, sharing whatever model you leverage, sharing it with the athlete ahead of time and saying, this is where we're at, and visually showing them, this is how I'm going to coach you. And when we are getting towards the end of any race, that's a key race, and at the end of the season, this is a part of the model. This is what we are going to discuss. Where many coaches run into trouble is they're so singularly focused on the looming race. They got the last race of the season and all of the passion, all of the energy comes into, I need to get you ready. I want you to go faster. I'm thinking about fueling, hydration, pacing, management, the training program, etc. And then it finishes. And it's celebration, disappointment, whatever happens. And then they say, oh, by the way, let's think about next year. And the athlete's head is already turned. They're just like, let me get away with this. And so you leverage a model like this, and whatever model works for you, and you start having these conversations with the athlete in the months before the season finishes. So that includes when you're 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, 5 weeks out, 8 weeks out. Let's think about what we need to focus on now. And one of the key elements is when we finish this, we're going to have a hot debrief, as we like to call it, after the race. What went well, what didn't go well. We're going to give you a little bit of space, 24, 48, 72 hours a week if necessary. Then we're going to come together and we're going to assess. And together we're going to partner to go through the process I outlined so that we can think about what was great, what was not so great, so that we can take you to a whole next level in the coming year. So you start these conversations in advance so it's not a surprise. It doesn't come across as an act of desperation, because what athletes want is to be led. They want it to be guided with a collaborative partner. And so if your lens is only a finish line, and then that is the end of the journey many times. But if you're talking about the cycle and saying, look, however well we'll do, we want to get even better next year. That's a part of the journey. There's not a start and a finish line. It's a progressive building cycle. And as a part of that cycle, this is what we're going to do. It enables that conversation to happen. You've got the opportunity to close off the off-ramp and then start to discuss the value, the critical value of off-season and not going rogue. It's a really, really important factor.
Fantastic. What would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that coaches make during these season review conversations that might actually lead to athlete drop-off?
I think the first is the coaches coming with their checklist of what the athlete did right or wrong, but not actually giving space to hear from the athlete first. So a common misconception is coaching is not telling someone what to do and not having all of the answers. And if you create a space and you give the athlete in advance some homework and you let them lead first and make it structured and say, this is what I want to talk about. I want to talk about what was really good, what you felt went well. What did you do? So you put it on the onus on them. What did you execute really well? And then how about the broader partnership? What do you think we did really well? helps them be reflective and look at the positive, then go through the things that were not so good. Where did they fail to execute? And then where did we fail to execute? And provide that as the starting point. Then what you start to do is rebound off of what you're hearing and open up opportunities to have a really positive conversation in the pursuit of growth. Where a lot of coaches go wrong is they think that they have to lead quite often with a position of strength and authority. They don't have a little bit of vulnerability, and I don't mean vulnerability and weakness. I'm not a big fan of that word because I think it's overused, and quite often it's like, oh, I'm vulnerable. That's not what I'm talking about, but actually saying, look, we're not going to get all the answers right in this partnership, but we're going to learn, we're going to grow. And so your feedback is important, and consistently reminding the athlete, the reason we're doing this is not to look back and judge, but to plan forward with purpose. And so we have to look back so we can be better. How do we become better? How do we help you actually get into a performance win cycle, as I would call it? And so it's the environment that you're setting. And without that context first, it can feel punitive. And quite often I see athletes, and we do a lot of work with our coaches, don't arrive with a checklist. If you arrive with your checklist and say, you didn't do strength and I told you to, you didn't eat well and I told you to, you consistently went too hard and I told you to, you've destroyed their confidence. They're much more likely to get defensive. And the athlete is uncomfortable. And if they're uncomfortable, they're going to exit. And so we really try and make this a conversation of building for the future. But in order to build, we want to hear about the past. We want to reflect on the past because that's how we learn. And when you start to have that positive cycle, it creates stickiness. It creates the bedrock of any high-performing team across any arena in life is very simple: trust and understanding. That's what we're looking to establish as coach. The second area is alignment on mission, having a shared mission. That's your journey. This is what success is. I'm going to partner with you. And then it's support and accountability. So if you have that commitment to a shared vision, and I'm holding you to account and supporting you in a really positive environment, then we get to great results. So these are conversations that are trust builders. They're not classic retention tools. They're not persuading you to stick around. And I often approach these, sorry to go on a bit too much, but I approach these conversations, and again, I should reinforce it. These can't be surprises. These need to be pre-planned. These need to be talked so that you get the athlete like it. But sticking around is inevitable. It's not, are you staying or not? That's an assumed. No, we're going on this journey together. It's a great surprise if you want to. What? Hang on, no, we're only just getting going. But you only earn that right and that trust if you're feeding the education of the long-term journey. And the last thing I'll say is many athletes need to shift their perspective because they are start line to finish line of their key race. I need to train for 20 hours a week. And so that education process needs to be throughout the year. Then you have a much better opportunity of retention.
Makes plenty of sense.
The last thing I would say off the cuff a little bit is as a coach, the one thing we haven't talked about is I've touched on positivity, but I'm going to touch on inspiration. When we think about athletes and we think about our roles and we think about the most fulfilling coaching relationships, is when people accomplish stuff that they don't believe is possible for them. Those are the stories that are most inspirational. It doesn't matter what the level is. And so a part of this moment in assessment and going through the transactional components and building trust, a big part of this is inspiring. One of the things that I often find myself saying to athletes is, you're so much stronger than you think you are. You can accomplish so much more. And it's not easy. It's not. But we can do this. And we've talked in other discussions about the value and benefit of taking on big challenges and getting out of your comfort zone. This is a great time to have these conversations and say, come on, let's strip it all away. Don't go and repeat what you've done before. take on a big challenge. And it's very hard to do that in a vacuum. But if we partner together, you're so much stronger. So I would say make these conversations not just assessments. That word is quite sterile. Not just reviews, but ignite enthusiasm, inspiration, and allow them as an athlete to dream and say that, because that's the thing. If you get them to think bigger and they know that you'll be with them, then it further cements that trust, and it's really, really valuable for the athlete.
Well, I think that is a perfect segue into my next question for you, which is how to really get athletes excited for the off season, right? We see that, as you've said before, I like to use your term of athletes going rogue, and, you know, wanting to take a break and do whatever they want to. But how do you really get as a coach, get an athlete excited for the foundations that you want to set for them in the off season?
Yeah, we've done a lot of work of this on our Purple Patch podcast in prior episodes, and talking about off season as being the number one predictor. And I say this authentically, by the way, for coaches listening. I believe the off season is the number one predictor of an athlete of any level actually up leveling the next year. Whenever you see an athlete that's had a huge breakthrough, the one common thing, they haven't done it by adding more, they haven't done it by outworking, they haven't done it through toughness and discipline. The one common thing that's always there is a really good off season. And so I think we need to meet our athletes where we are when we talk about off season. There's a few things that I think are helpful. The first is yes. And yes, this is important. I want you to rejuvenate. I want you to take a break. I want you to spend more time with your family and your professional life and everything else. I want you to have greater flexibility to go and do other fun things that are out there, whether you want to go to Tahiti surfing or whether you want to do cross-country skiing. All of that is true, and that's important. And with that, when you're doing a successful off-season, it is not the same as the rest of your year. And what I mean by that is your training demands are less. It can take up much less time, lower cognitive load. It can be really fun, but make no mistake about it. The magic word around athlete development and success is consistency. And so with that, these coming weeks, the challenge that we face, me as a coach, you as an athlete, the challenge we face is how do we get you to have that break, spend more time with family, friends, etc., invest in your professional life, and also realizing that off-season is a phase of training. It's not a break. The worst thing that you can do is go rogue. And so that's the sort of summary conversation that you first have. We then move on and say, okay, well, what does it look like then? What are we looking to accomplish? And quite often, I'll talk about the value of training in broader life first and say, okay, we're going to talk about the details of off-season. We're going to talk about what you should focus on and what it actually looks like in a tangible way, which I'll get into. But first, let's think about what training does to you in broader life. Training is a part of your structure of life. So you have to actually prioritize when you're committed to sports, whether you're training for a marathon or a triathlon or whatever it might be. And that structure is the thing that helps people be effective. If you want something done, give it to a busy person. And so whenever we see athletes go rogue and go random, quite often they become less effective, counterintuitive in other parts of life. And so they just start get scattered. And it's a similar thing to what happened in the pandemic. When everything shut down, people had a really hard time because they lost commutes, they lost regular schedules, and people became really ineffective. That's what we see when athletes just go rogue. So just say, look, we want to create structure and routine to help you intentionally invest in the other parts of your life. So what does off-season look like in that? And typically what we do at Purple Patch is we encourage athletes to drop their total training investment. So if someone's training 12 or 16 hours a week, they'll move down to 7 or 8, 10 or 12. So they're reduced by about a third typically. It's not the same for every athlete, but that's a good rule of thumb. And then we say, Look, you don't have to do mindless, long miles of training when the weather's grim, the days are short, and it's cold, and make it really dull. Instead, what this is just a phase of training that is preparatory. And so let's stack rank it. And depending on the athlete, it's typically, let's dial in strength, number one. Let's do some really time effective and important specific work that we want the athletes to hit. And if you're on the bike, quite often that's short, high intensity, that's skill development type work, that's technical development. When we're not chasing demands, an athlete has greater mental capacity to think about technique and skill development. So that's number two, doesn't need to take much time. Number three, let's fill the rest of the time with really soul-filling stuff that's enjoyable. If you want to go and mountain bike, or most of your running that you do could be easy. So some really social stuff. That creates the through line. And then the final component is, what are, relative to you, if I was coaching you, Allison, what are the things that we want to build on in the habits standard, that what I call the supporting cast, whether it's fueling, whether it's nutrition, whether it's sleep habits, whether it's organizational effectiveness. What's the one or two things that you can put into place now when you don't have huge demands that you can actually put into place and build from? And if you lock that in, and then when it comes to January, February time, you're stronger, you've got great tissue resilience, you've been consistent, you're fresh mentally, and you're ready to train. And I think one last thing, knowing that I'm on a big monologue here, I understand, is your success in off-season. This is very, very helpful for coaches. We are not trying to improve your fitness. That's a good coaching cue. Now, athletes will incrementally build their fitness through the off-season, but that's not our definition of success. I'm not trying to make you a faster runner right now, a faster swimmer, a more powerful bike rider. What I'm doing is creating some core competencies and getting the body ready so that when it's time to go, your body and mind is equipped to absorb the training and get the return. So we're putting the foundations, and that's very, very helpful for athletes to hear, because that's the thing that says, oh, I can do that. I'm just putting my foundations, but it's not going to be the same. It's not going to feel like a shackle. It's not going to feel like I have to do this and I have to sacrifice other areas of life. And that ignites fun, enthusiasm, and commitment ultimately.
If you can get 100 hours head start on the competition for next year, I think that would get many athletes excited.
That is. Thank you for reminding me. That's our phase, and that's such a sort of a shift in perspective, because currently, right now, if you take cyclists, runners, triathletes, they view off season as optional, and you actually say, look, over the course of these months, you don't have to do many hours a week, that you are doing high value return foundational work, not in a classic base building, but foundational building block work, that when we hit the end of January and you say, right, I'm ready, you're 100 hours ahead. You've accumulated with, just on a week-to-week basis, high consist. Imagine that. Imagine the depressuring, where you don't have that panic. You don't have the urge to radically ramp up quickly, where athletes get injured or get plateaued very quickly. And you actually say, I'm ahead of the game. That gives you a buffer. And that's the investment. That's what I want to achieve for you as an athlete. Then they buy, because they see it in that context. So I think that's very, very helpful. Feel free to steal that as a coach. Use it every time.
Fantastic. I'd love to hear more about what you deem as your off-season toolkit that your coaches use for your athletes. What does that mean? What is this toolkit that you have spoken to?
Yeah, so if we define off-season as a critical phase of training, and I think that's important for coaches, and we've spoken about this before, but it is a phase of training and it's a phase of preparation. So in this phase, we are not necessarily chasing the classical fitness gains that we associate with training in the rest of the year. So we're not priming for races. We're not trying to boost our thresholds and other variables that we might measure. It's really a phase of preparation, that we're putting the building blocks in place so that when the athlete does and the coach does dial up the commitment, dial up the focus, and ramp the training, the athlete is mentally and physically prepared. And so we go through, and with off-season, firstly, we reduce the expectations on the athlete from a time commitment, typically around a third. And we say, okay, we're going to do some really specific training for you. But while we have this window where it's a long way away from race demands, we're not asking you to execute heavy training. You're going to have more capacity to rejuvenate mentally and physically, more time to spend with family, friends, and your professional commitments. But more than that, we've got this golden opportunity that you can execute stuff and build practices and habits that are very difficult to integrate. Even though we all universally understand that they're important, they're very difficult to integrate when you're driving and training for racing. So what might those be? What might be the focus? And so there is a training component, and that is, okay, let's execute training that is far away from demands. I'll give you an example of that. If I'm training an Ironman triathlete, a long distance ultra race, that's a important sort of long resilience training, classic fitness, etc. So in the off season, I'm going to have them focus on short, high speed and power. That's number one. And so that's just one example of this, some very, very important stuff. For running, I might say, let's actually do really easy, frequent running to strengthen and improve the integrity of our tendons, muscles, and ligaments, so that when we go and ramp up the training and start doing track intervals or long distance running, the body is more resilient and more injury proof. So we shine the light on the training side that's far away from the demands of racing. That's number one. Number two, the second part of the toolkit is strength. That's a critical component. That's our bullseye. Every athlete really building the foundational practice of strength, the number one thing every week. And then number three, a suite of practices and habits that are important in support of the athlete journey to retain health, to maximize adaptations. Proper daily eating habits, post-workout fueling, great hydration, building a habit of quality sleep, being really organized so that all of the elements of life and training and everything else that comes with it can work together and not compete one another. And we're looking to put these practices in place. So that's our broad toolkit that we think about. And I would say those are universals. They don't take up much time, but they're important. The second layer to that is what we would call projects. So every athlete finishes every year and often says, I'd love to work on my swim, or my bike is a weakness. I just, I'm a good triathlete and I swim pretty well. My run's good, but I just suck on the bike. Or I do my marathon, but, my form's not very good. Whatever the features are. So what we like our athletes to do is to say there are a set of practices in off season that are not fitness driven so far as an outcome, but are foundational in outcome. And then we encourage athletes, if they would like, to take on a project. And we typically differentiate it. So a project might be, I'm really going to focus on nutrition. Athletes that want to build foundational healthy eating habits or improve their body composition, it's a great project to do right now because we don't have race demands. We might have another group of athletes to say, I'm going to do everything, but I'm going to shine my project on strength. I've always struggled with it. I've never committed. I'm going to double down on strength. Or you might have athletes take on one of their disciplines. If it's a triathlete, either a swim, bike, or run, technical development. So this enables athletes to personalize and say, this is the thing that I'm going to focus on. Not to get a faster swimmer, become a faster runner, but put the foundational elements in place so that I'm well ahead of my game. And when I do start to train, it's more effective. So that's our lens. The one final thing I will say on it as well is it makes it really fun for the athletes, because most of us are challenge driven. Most of us get out of the bed in the morning because we're chasing a goal. This enables a goal that isn't performance related so far as what we get from a race, but instead it's performance foundational. And that scratches that itch in a way. It's like, okay, I've got something to actually tie my wagon to. That's what I'm going to drive on, and that's what we focus on. So that's how we do it as a foundational element of how we think about the construct of off-season.
So this toolkit that you speak to is really like the whole looking at the athlete holistically, at their training holistically, and what are these, what are these habits, these basic health habits that are contributing to either their success or their their failure at their goals.
Yeah, so we'll define what coaching is, and what coaching is not is just the prescription of the training program. I had an athlete that said to me just last week, and it rang true for me. It made my heart sing a little bit. He said, the lowest value that I get from the relationship is the plan. That's the easy part. It's the education, it's the coaching, it's the filtering of what I should focus on. That's why I'm here. And to me, that's what we are as coaches. Like the prescription of the plan, if you're thinking that is coaching, that's just prescribing workouts. And if we think about what it takes for athletes to be successful, they don't have an information challenge. In today's society, they are coming in way smarter than they were 20 years ago. They have access to way more information on a day-to-day basis, but they're still struggling. They're struggling because they're confused and they don't know what they should focus on, who they should believe. There's a lot of contradiction out there. There's a lot of confusion. So our role as coaches is to, prescribe the right training program, but it's to help the athletes filter out the noise, understand what they should focus on, and then help them establish those habits. The off-season is the great time. So if we remove the training and we think about what some of these habits are, I'll give you a few as an example. Hydration. Athletes do a pretty good job hydrating out of their bottles when they're on the bike or they're running, etc. But most people are walking around like dried sponges. And the impact of that is more volatile energy and lower energy, impaired cognitive function, a suppressed immune system. So right now, build a habit where the athlete is hydrating enough for cellular function, to improve your adaptations, to feel better. It's very simple. And so outside of their hydration in their training, get them to consume at least 2 to 3 liters of fluid every day. And when we go to sleep at night, we lose a liter of fluid when we're asleep at night. So that's about 32 ounces. So start the day with a liter of fluid. Very, very simple practice. Put it in place as a habit when they actually have cognitive capacity to say, oh, I can do this now, because they're not worried about fitting in their next workout. Another one would be post-workout fueling. This is one that I used to say is the number one mistake for athletes. I would say going too easy, not going easy enough in easy sessions, and failing to consume calories after workouts. Athletes have become smarter, but this is a non-negotiable. And when people are busy, they skip this, they forget it. And so ensuring that they're consuming protein and carbohydrate after every workout, it doesn't matter how short or easy. These are foundational habits. And ensuring that you're helping them build these so that, think about what a habit is. It's something you do without focus. It slides into the subconscious. It's a practice. So we're helping them with behavior modification. And whatever it is for you, I won't go through, we have 10 of them. And I won't go through all 10 right now. But whatever the important things are for you as a coach, make these your non-negotiables across your athlete population. Take athletes on a journey to build these, because if you can do this, you're increasing their capacity, you're making them more resilient, you're giving them control, and any training that you prescribe to them in the future that is going to be really demanding, they're better equipped to positively adapt. Because ultimately, athlete success is not about how much training you can give them. It's how much training that can be effectively adapted to. That's what we're looking to get done. It needs to fit into life. So this is the time to sort of integrate these practices and habits, I would say.
This is a fantastic segue into my next question for you, which is how you actually build effective off-season programs. And I know we just spoke to how important habits are, even more important than the training, how important coaching is in helping filter through the noise for athletes. But at the end of the day, they are looking for a program and a plan, right? So how do you integrate all of these concepts as coaches into an effective plan for the off season?
So I'll share how we do it, but let's get to the nuts and bolts of training first. So whatever number of hours the athlete tends to be committed to, we first really encourage them to reduce that. And so what we want to do is increase capacity. And the one way to do that is to reduce training commitment. And because fitness evolution is not the stated purpose of this important phase of training, we can do that. So we want to have an optimization mindset. So if an athlete's training 10 to 12 hours, we might ask them to say, hey, on a given week, do 7 hours a week. Straight away, it's like, wow, what am I going to do with those other 5 hours? And of course, if they then want to go and cross-country ski or hike or run, have them do that. It's fun. Have them go hiking, and that creates that sense of rejuvenation. So that's an important prescriptive element. The second component is we overemphasize strength and conditioning. So that becomes, in a normal part, every other part of the training phase, in other words, the other 9 months of the year or so, we have the core competency of the sport. So if you're a cyclist, it's biking. If you're a runner, it's running. If you're a triathlete, swim, bike, and run. That's the priority, and strength is a critical supporting agent to it. In off-season, strength is the bullseye. And so those become your 2 key workouts of the week, period. Every single athlete, we're going to adhere to strength. And then we wrap any endurance training around that. So that's the second thing we do. And the third element then is we still retain a key and supporting mindset. When I look at a lot of coaches' training prescriptions, it's very, very hard sometimes to say, okay, what are you trying to achieve here? Because each one of these workouts as a standalone is pretty good value. I can understand why you're prescribing it. But when you look at the whole week, it kind of looks like chicken casserole. And so as an athlete, where are the priorities here? So the way that we build it is to say, here are our key workouts, the ones where I really want you as an athlete to show up your best. And so I'm going to bring full focus and attention. I want to be in the moment. And I want you to do everything you can to ensure that you perform your best at these, because these are going to drive the performance need. The rest of the workouts are supporting. They're important, but they generally are a bit more general conditioning, endurance, maybe technical type work. So that's how we manage training over the course of the weeks. And what that empowers athletes is to understand when they need to show up, and sometimes where they can be a little less present. It's not too bad. You go on a little easy run. It's soul-filling. It's stress processing. It's helpful in broader life, but you're still building tissue resilience. So we maintain that structure in off-season. The 2 key workouts are strength, and then we're typically identifying 1 or 2 other workouts as non-negotiables. So suddenly that's 3 or 4 workouts. Everything else has much greater flex. The difference is those key workouts tend to be 1, short high intensity, because it's a good time to build the size of your physiological engine, so very, very high intensity, and the other one being very technical in nature. And so how you apply that is athlete dependent. Are you working with a triathlete, a swimmer, a cyclist, a cross-country skier, a rower, whatever it might be? And that creates a sense of autonomy, because those other supporting workouts, whether there's 1 of them, 2 of them, 3 of them, 8 of them, those are the ones that have a lot of flex. And if you end up having a work party, great, don't do a workout that day. If you end up wanting to go and spend time with families and kids and throw the ball around, great, limit the workout or dump it. And they're keeping that consistency and through line with the specificity without losing. So that's how we build the structure globally of the core elements, which is the endurance training and the strength training as it relates to coaching.
Yeah. So I'm so curious to know how and what metrics you would measure during the off season as a coach, to ensure that your athletes are at least maintaining fitness, or, how do you approach that to know that the off season is indeed effective?
So this is going to be counterintuitive. This might send some shockwaves to many coaches. I don't look at metrics too much. I put some ceilings on, and what I mean by that is if an athlete, particularly a more serious athlete, is going to go out and do some really high value foundational work, if they do want to go out and add some miles, and there's nothing wrong with that, the mythical zone 2 is high value. And so under that, I would want to put a cap and make sure that they're keeping their intensity, heart rate, power, pace, etc., in the parameter that we want if we've got that specificity. But outside of that, if we're doing a VO2 max session, I want them to understand the intent of the workout. I want them to bring their best, but I'm not looking for performance progression per se. I want them to get to very, very high heart rate at the best of their ability on that day. And then it's done. And it moves on. So I'm okay with an athlete losing some conditioning. I'm okay for them to get a little less fit in the classic sense of the word, if they're putting building blocks in place, if they're being consistent with their training. And the more that I live that with a flexible life, and of course I'm tracking them and I'm making sure that they're adhering to enough training relative to their goals. But as soon as you start as a coach looking for progression in speed or power or fitness over these 2 months or so, you're going to start to run into trouble. You're going to start to project onto the athlete. And so it's having the confidence to say, that's not what we're tracking right now. Actually making it really soul-filling, having fun. So then the athlete, if they're out for a trail run and they end up converting it to a hike, it's great. In the big picture, they're moving their body, they're outside in nature, it's really fun, there's tissue resilience, and it's okay. The last thing I want is that athlete going like this the whole time. I want them to be doing this. And so that's how you start to imbuild the feeling that off-season isn't shackling, it isn't cognitive load, it's quite free, but you're doing stuff that is equipping the athlete that when you say, all right, it's time to go, and typically the athlete tells you when it's time to go. Let's say it's January 15th. You're like, all right, you're so far ahead with the athlete that you can dial it up. And you can dial it up typically at a faster rate than an athlete that's gone rogue can do. And you will get yield and you get that validation, but it's lasting progression. It's much higher likelihood that they're not going to get injured. I think a big part of the reason that our athletes historically have a very, very low injury rate isn't because we do less training. I've never got accused of being too easy, but I think it's because we do a really good job of selling off-season as something that's fun, fresh, different, rejuvenating, but critical. And if you get that in, as soon as the athlete has done it once, I will tell you, and our retention rate in off-season is under 2% of a churn rate. So it's under 2% across all of our athletes globally. And the vast majority of our athletes report to us that this is their most enjoyable phase of the year. So coaches, I remember when I was a junior coach thinking, I really hate off-season because there's the exit ramps, athletes are going to leave, what do I do with them? And what we really try and do beyond this, which is answering a different question as well, is we really double down on education, community, and fun. And so we have an ecosystem, which we call our hub, athletes all over the world, and we bring them together. Our coaches do a lot of education around the different buckets we talked about. We want athletes to share. We share our visions. It's a really fun phase of the year because it's pretty pressure-free. People are posting that they're hiking and mountain biking, and it's good, but they're keeping the magic word of performance, which is consistency. So bring the athletes together. People don't want to be an island. People want to be connected socially, but in a really organic way where they feel like they're a part of something. And if you can do that, you're going to be more successful as a coach, but it's also going to make it easier for you, is the truth.
Absolutely. Wonderful stuff. I'm very curious to know how you use TrainingPeaks to deliver this experience to your athletes.
So we do several things. Obviously, the training first, and we leverage the TrainingPeaks strength program. It's wonderful, the new strength builder. We put our own videos in. I don't think that's necessary for most coaches, by the way. There's such a great library in there. We just we have some stuff that we like to do, so we use our own videos. But the strength training, and obviously the swim, bike, and run, if we're coaching a triathlete, in there. And we leverage notes a lot to put them in there and give them a lot of options. We give them time-starved and time-rich versions of workouts. So if they've got more time, they can do that. If they want to do less, we say, hey, this is what to do. So it gives them autonomy. We identify the key workouts. So we use notes and say, hey, here are your key workouts. So move them around. It's okay. And we give the athletes autonomy to drop it down. And then we also put cells in there, notes in there, and quote workouts. They're not workouts around our Sunday special, which is our week planning tool that we use. We put reminders in, have you hydrated today? So we use the platform as not just a dumping ground of training prescription, but their ecosystem is reminding and nurturing to track if they're actually adhering to these habits. Because there are other tracking tools out there, but then you're giving someone another app. And we all have app fatigue. So we try and leverage the platform to help build the relationship and help them prioritize, which is really, really important. And then finally, I will say, and then as a coach, if I'm having my coach call with an athlete in off season, I'm not pulling up charts and saying, let's look at our fitness progression. Let's look at TSS. So we remove all of that and we just let them be. And it's really, it comes as a surprise, and it comes as a lot of fun. They really, really enjoy it, I'll say. I will say that, if there are coaches listening and they want to further the discussion, if they'd like our perspective, if we can share anything, we would be happy. We mentor and help a lot of coaches, so they should feel free to reach out to us and say, hi, I'm a coach. Can I get more information on A, B, and C? We'd be happy to share. We have a lot of coaches on our platform even that use it for that, and that's absolutely fine. There's plenty of athletes to go around, and our pursuit is to try and help athletes be more successful and fit sport into life. So happy to help on that.
Matt, you are just a wealth of information, and I so appreciate your time talking to us at TrainingPeaks today. And we can't wait to get this great information out to our coaches.
Thank you very much, Allison. Thanks for inviting me and allowing me to share some thoughts, and hopefully it triggers a little bit of inspiration and maybe some consideration. And if anyone has any thoughts or feedback or would like to hear more, of course, we'd love to hear it as well, because that's how we all improve as coaches. So I don't claim to have all the answers, but I've got a few little bits of nuggets and wisdom in my bucket.
Yeah, just a little bit of knowledge soaked in along the way, right?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Matt.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to Endurance Unlimited. Be sure to like, subscribe, and follow us on your platform of choice to never miss new episodes. Also, be sure to leave a 5-star rating to let your coach and the algorithm know you're ready to dial in your training. Find more resources to help you take on your next challenge at TrainingPeaks.com, or find us on social media at TrainingPeaks. Got questions? Leave a comment or send an email to podcast@TrainingPeaks.com. Good luck in whatever you're training for, and trust the process to reach your potential.